after the break?
It was good. Very pleased with just the urgency that our guys had. Obviously, when you give guys an amount of time, certainly that amount of time, you're anticipating a little bit of rust potentially. But our guys came back and were very sharp from a mental standpoint. But the thing that I loved about it, they had great energy, which is not always the case after a long break like that. But our leaders really stepped up and made sure that the urgency was there, starting in the locker room, and it carried all the way out in the field.
We've talked a lot about how JL and Tyreek were some of the most improved tacklers on the team last year. Where can they improve this year?
You know, there's always ways to improve, especially at that safety position, because there's so many opportunities and different angles that safeties have to be good at finding in order to get the ball carrier down on the ground. And so both those two guys are really emphasizing that throughout every practice of, all right, any situation, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna get this rep as far as the angle that I wanna take in order to get that ball carrier on the ground. If it's a wrap tempo, whether it's what we call our fit tempo, they're always trying to get reps in order to make sure that, hey, when game time comes and we get into live action in the fall, they've gotten those reps and they've banked those reps, so it just becomes natural to them as far as finding the right angles.
Where do you see them this spring as compared to last spring? You were here last year.
Yes, yeah, and I'll tell you this, I'm so fired up for what those two are doing from a leadership standpoint, from just how they're carrying themselves day in and day out, not just on the practice field, but within the meeting room, within the weight room, and everything that they're doing, because they are setting such a high standard for everyone else, and guys have to try and meet their standard in everything we're doing, and that's just gonna make all of us that much better, including myself as a coach. You know, I've got to show up every single day and make sure I've got it prepared for, hey, how am I going to challenge T. Jones? How am I going to challenge JL today to get them to the level that they want to get to? And at the same time, make sure the other guys are seeing that and understanding where they have to continue to grow.
When you talk about the challenge and getting them to the next level, how much of that is mental? They know they're good football players. Mm-hmm. So how do you keep them motivated in their minds, and how much self-policing do they do?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. And it comes down to finding ways to challenge them as far as whether it's a schematic thing that we're trying something new and we're trying to do something that takes advantage of their talents and abilities and their experience that they have, whether it's just giving them more little luxury items that I call as far as just from an offensive standpoint, tendencies, formations, wide receiver splits, just finding all the just little details that we can continue to emphasize with them that's going to make them better in the long run. And regardless of how many games they got under the belt, how much success they've had, never satisfied. Always trying to find a way in which they can get better at their game, and there's always something that I can find and help them tweak in order to take the next step.
With JL in particular, he obviously had a decision to make. I mean, it ended up sounding like it being pretty easy, but just for him to come back, I mean, have you noticed anything? I know he's been limited, but just in terms of him, motivation or just his focus, just knowing that he came back for a reason, obviously wants to do big things this year?
His purpose, his urgency has been awesome. And again, it's not just from on the field. When he always is going to bring energy to our group. He's a competitor out there, but just his purpose and his urgency within each meeting room and helping guys, and not just only himself as far as taking the notes that he needs to take, but helping other guys, young guys, understand the why within each position. And so that part's been awesome, but both by him and by T.
Did you and he sit down this offseason and talk about those targeting penalties and how to stay out of those situations?
Ultimately, that's me as a coach. Got to find better ways to teach guys and make sure that I drill it the right way. So again, it's just creating habits, and that every time that he comes in to make a correct form tackle, that he's keeping his helmet out of the situation and continues to play with that same physicality and that urgency that he has to get to the football. And so I've just got to do a really good job of making sure that I'm giving him the drills and giving him opportunities to practice the proper technique to make a physical tackle the way he can, but stay on the field as well.
The nickel, how you replace Calla? Are you more philosophically into having a corner play there or a safety? Who's in the mix on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And from a schematic standpoint, that position is extremely important to what we do. And that guy's got to have a big knowledge and an understanding of the defense, not just his piece, but all 11 pieces on the field. And so that's a position that over the course of spring that we're just continuing to develop. We're trying to find guys that starting within the safety room, because the safeties have a good idea or understanding of everything that's going around them and controlling the pieces around them. So it's a natural fit for them to go in there and play that nickel position, because the majority of the time they're communicating back and forth with the nickel anyway. And we're all meeting together in the same room, so we get a chance to hear what the coaching points are for each room.
Kafensis is the only nickel list on the roster officially. So,
yeah.
So who are some of the safety guys?
So some other guys that we're looking at, Shea Oladipo, that played a little bit of field safety last year, has got some opportunities this spring to look at that. Zion Washington, another young guy that's going to be another guy that we feel like has the physical capabilities and the mental capacity to handle that position as well. So those are two young guys that we're going to try out. And then you know that you can always, or at least I know I can always put T. Jones down there, move a JL down there. We can do some different things from those guys as far as their versatility as well. And then once we get Roman back, once we get some of these other guys that have not participated thus far, then we got more options as well. So I'm fired up about just the amount of guys that will have that versatility for us.
Kane, who's a young guy that stood out to you this spring?
Thus far, I really like where we're at as far as Shea and his development. And he's got more and more confidence just coming off of a season where he did get a lot of reps. And he did get some opportunities to jump in there when his number was called and had production, right? 2 interceptions against UTEP. So he's a guy that has felt the success on the field and has played in some big games and some big moments. So he carried that confidence over from the season into the offseason and now in the spring ball. And you see him growing more and more with each rep and with each day.
The nickel seems to move around more. Is it a more complex position than
Yes.
the safeties?
Yes, I mean, all 3 of those positions are very complex and very important within our scheme. Those 3 guys handle a lot of what's going on in the back end as far from a communication standpoint. The safety set everything from the back end as far as what's going on, but that nickel is such a vital piece to whether it's a disguise, whether it's just communication with the backers, the run fits. That position is vitally important to what we're doing from a schematic standpoint.
I know there was a little turnover, obviously, on the defensive staff, but for you and Spencer to have your 2 together, how have you noticed the difference there?
It's awesome. Working with Coach D, Spence is, and as you said, just having another year under our belts together, being very familiar with just how we work and how we operate, having an understanding of we want the front 7 and the back 4, and really, there is no difference. It has to be all one. And the 2 of us working together, along with Coach Av and all the other D staff, man, it's been awesome to have that continuity. Any successful program, is going to have some continuity within the staff, whether it's just a couple guys here and there, but that way it keeps the consistency as far as just language and verbiage for the players. And I think with the 2 of us and Coach Frank being able to keep that verbiage and that consistent language all the time and really the standards and expectations of what we want this defense to be, that stays consistent the same, that's huge.
I think there's like a history of, the nickel always kind of being important in, Boise State, like Clinton City used to play it. What is it about, some of the schemes that you've been a part of that makes the nickel important? Can you kind of explain, like, some of the responsibilities? I know you're saying, they got to be communicators and be in positions, but specifically on the field, like, what does that look like?
It's a very versatile position, meaning one play you may be playing man-to-man on a slot receiver, which it's one of the hardest things to do in football. There's so much space, and most of those slot receivers are going to be your fast, quick type guys, and so you've got to have the athletic ability to stay with that guy. And then on the next play, you may be the guy coming off the edge and be a pass rusher and have to win a one-on-one with an offensive tackle or a tight end. So you've got to have that type of versatility as well. And then the very next play, now high hat, I've got to drop into a pass coverage, maybe it's a zone concept, and now I've got to understand my hook drop and where I belong within that scheme. And then the next play, it's a rundown, and now I've got to be able to fit and be physical enough to help set an edge within our defense and understand the run fits. So all of those things wrapped into one individual, that's pretty special.